Good afternoon, everyone. This is Theater 3. I'm Captain Jonathan Chapman with U.S. Cyber Command. At this moment, we're going to have a briefing by C3 AI. At this time, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name's Ed Cardone. I retired after 36 years in the Army. How did I get in this space? I'm a little bit of everything, hard civil engineer, flipped over into the combat side as a colonel, 2nd Infantry Division, then came to Army Cyber Command. In 2013 to 2016, in the Office of Business Transformation. So the title of this is Why Most AI Projects Fail. We're going to talk about the AI side of this for most of it, but there's a whole nother piece of this which is change management. I'm happy to talk about that as well on the end. I've done about 15 transformations in the department. The biggest one was the last one I worked on, which was creation of Army Futures Command. The first time a major command had been created in the Army since 1973. So with that, let's go on to the next chart here. Next chart, it's not so important. Okay, the first problem in my mind of why these things fail is they're not repeatable. And what happens is we have this great idea, we'll do a little pilot and we pick a little place with very specific data, a very specific problem, and then when we take that over to something that's very similar, the data's different, the problem's different, and we can't get it to scale. That's the first problem, is it's not repeatable, they're all one-offs. The second problem is, it's going berserk. The second problem is, if you really want it to scale, it has to be reusable. Because if not, you're inventing the same thing over and over again. It's like you have to build the watch from scratch every time, but when you think about it at enterprise level, why do you have to do that? And if you have to do that, then it's no different than buying individual products. Then the final one is scalable. I actually learned this when I was Army Cyber, when IBM told me that they had a number of $100 million projects that never scaled. That made me start thinking a lot about scale. So when you look at the way the Department of Defense is organized, it's set up in a lot of silos. So when you start talking about scale, you have to start thinking about scale from when you start, not at the end. You start at the end, you built an individual project. Give me the next slide, please, here. Now, is enterprise AI enough? So I've heard this complaint numerous times, and I should caveat all my remarks with this comment. It's no different in the private sector. You know, Bank of America, it's 23 banks that have been smashed together. Just think about that. So the problems that we say have problems and they're unique, they're not that unique to a lot of problems that exist today in the private sector. The difference is they have some different drivers. But let me first talk about legacy. What I mean by legacy is, let's just take, a lot of people use Spark. But Spark is going to be replaced by Ray. And those of you on the cutting edge, people are already saying, oh, we don't want to use Spark, we want to use Ray. Well, what happens if you built your models using Spark and all of a sudden now you're using Ray? What has to change? And you start thinking about how all these different, everything that manages data, all the microservices and applications, all of the different clouds, how do you work with legacy? And then how do you account for future? And so that's another problem with enterprise AI, because whatever you build, it has to capture what's in the past and be able to adapt for what's coming new in the future. And there will be a lot of new future. And so is there something that can do this? Then my final point here is on integration. This drives me nuts. I've dealt with this my entire career. In the Department of Defense right now, maybe 2 years ago, 18 months ago, Secretary Austin said, oh, we have 200 AI projects in the department. I know what that is. That's 200 separate technology stacks upon which AIs are being built that will never integrate. Now, I have a lot of scars on this because this is what happens to division commanders. Look at this great stuff we have. Look at this great stuff we have. Look, the problem is none of it talks to each other. None of it can be put together, and so what you have to do is you throw manpower against it. And this is how all of a sudden you have a big problem. And so when you think about enterprise AI, how does it integrate with everything? Or is it an add-on? Next slide. Yeah, so some myths. So the first myth is, if you do this correctly, The first myth is, oh, the pilot won't scale. Well, if you did your pilot correctly, and you took your 5 years of data and used 3 to train and 2 to do your V&V, if it works, you just plug it into your data source and it all of a sudden is an enterprise. Now, you have to start that way from the beginning. That brings you myth number 2, which is pilot equals enterprise. Maybe. But you have to think about this from the beginning. And so we, Thomas and I, when we develop these pilots, there's a lot of thought into what the outcome will be, but as important as what are the inputs, and are those inputs actually enterprise inputs? And if they are, you're going to have an enterprise result on the end. So this idea, the myth is when we do a pilot, we'll be able to have enterprise. And on DoD lexicon, often there's a contracting issue here as well. You contracted for a pilot. All you got to do is connect the data sources and you have something enterprise. Well, what was the contract mechanism for that? And so it could actually take a year to get done because you have to redo it because you didn't realize that pilot could equal enterprise if you do it correctly. And with that, I think I'm going to turn over to my colleague Thomas here for a minute. Next slide. Yep. Thomas, take it away for us.
Hi everyone, Thomas Higginbotham. I've been at C3 for 3 years now, prior Air Force. Before that, spent some time at Google X. And we're thankful to have General Cardone here as he's our chair of our C3AI Federal Systems, and really just a key person to help drive our vision and how we implement this technology at scale, particularly for the cyber mission. Some of the things we wanted to talk about today were why AI projects fail. So let's start with, do AI projects fail? So these are some statistics coming from different studies over the past, I'll say 2 years, of projects not making an impact that they were expected, not delivering on the value that was promised, not being able to make it to production, or not being able to scale effectively beyond the pilot. These are all issues that we've seen as an enterprise AI company across industries, and I will say that failure is not unexpected. We expect failure in the cutting edge of this technology. I think what's most important is that in some domains, the cost of failure of an AI project is significant, and so it drives the imperative of learning from lessons of all these failures across industry, and that's what we want to talk about today because that's the unique vantage point that we have as an enterprise AI company. So some of the consequences of these AI failures are going to be increased costs, they're going to be failed missions, they're going to be wasted resources. It's going to be a significant technology overmatch if we do not do this correctly. And so that's why we're here. That's why we care about this topic. That's why we go to these conferences to speak on this topic, is because we have both served, many of you have served, or are currently serving, and this is something that is personally meaningful to all of us. We're not making any of this stuff up. You'll see some of these lessons come from a book our CEO wrote about 10 years ago called Digital Transformation. Our company, C3AI, was started with a lot of these same premises as embedded into the fabric of our company. And a lot of that starts with the way we approach enterprise AI, the way we approach a partnership with a customer or an organization, and the roadmap by which we move towards operationalizing the technology, in this case, enterprise artificial intelligence. So we'll talk through some of that here in a moment. So why most AI projects fail? Let's start with the bottom line up front. 4 things here. Projects don't focus on the value over a baseline that is measurable, objective, and quantifiable. Projects take too long to demonstrate that value. Projects aren't focused on the scalability that is required to get from your pilot to production. And then lastly, projects lack the adoption that is necessary, or they lack the support that's necessary for adoption at scale. So let's talk through each of these separately. So reason number 1, Projects lack measurable, objective, quantifiable value over a baseline. What we've seen time and time again is that projects that do not have a way to measure whether they're successful, and more importantly, to measure how successful they are, will fail. And they'll fail because the investments required to really change an organization and do digital transformation through enterprise artificial intelligence requires that you have a good roadmap for what is being replaced, what is being changed, what your current processes are, and what the benefit is by going to your aspirational processes. What we find time and time again, people come to us and say, we want to do artificial intelligence. And that right there is a red flag for us. Because what we really care about is not what technology you want to use or what solution you want, but we really care about what is the problem you're trying to solve. If we know and understand your problem very closely, and we understand the value that it's currently driving or the cost that it's currently driving, and then what your aspirational processes are and what that value is, then we can have a good conversation about where's the proper way or where's the proper place to insert artificial intelligence, and how do we do this in a way that is both effective from a business standpoint, a cost standpoint, and is also effective from the mission and the operational value. Second reason that we see projects fail is because they take too long to demonstrate that value. Demonstrating that objective, measurable, quantifiable value is, as I mentioned, critical, but if it takes too long to actually get to that value, then everyone's going to lose interest and they're going to move on to another technology or another solution. And what we see time and time again, particularly in the commercial sector, is we have a lot of 0 to 1 pilots, a lot of little fresh starts, but nothing that's actually grown into something that is digitally transformative, if you will. And so what we do as a company is we take a lot of care to make sure that we are scoping a pilot such that in 6 months, in 4 to 6 months, we are demonstrating something that is of meaningful value, that is quantifiable, and that it doesn't take longer than that 4 to 6 months. It's particularly important in the defense and intelligence world, where we see turnover of people in different roles constantly, and so you need the support of those people that you currently started your project with, and so that drives the 4 to 6 months. But that is another critical part here. That comes down to tractability of your scope. So, we believe that there's a lot of potential for artificial intelligence. But when you focus on a 4 to 6 month period of performance to prove and demonstrate that value, the tractability of your scope is critical. How many data sources are you integrating? How many models are you doing? How many users or applications are you developing off of this? Making sure that you fine-tune that scope such that it proves that value, but it does it in the time frame that you need, is really part of the lessons that we've learned over the past 13 years as a company. Number 3, projects were not developed or designed to scale after production. One of the problems we see is that when people want artificial intelligence, they want this innovation, they want this new technology refresh, they are willing to do whatever it takes to prove that value in the immediate term. What that creates is what we call the long tail sustainment for AI, which is technical debt. As you start to push to get to a solution right now in this 4 to 6 month time frame, you're building up a trade-off, and that trade-off is often technical debt. The problem with artificial intelligence is that's when you see some of these programs skyrocket in cost, because none of what they did in that first 4 to 6 months can be used in production. It needs to be completely refactored, and that's the technical debt that we're referring to. And so when we focus on executing the proper pilots, and General Cardone touched on this, if you scope a pilot correctly, it should be something that turns into the enterprise. And part of that is a technical solution, but part of that is more of a socio-technological human decision to make sure that what you're building now is also usable in the future. Last thing I'll talk through is the lack of support and adoption at scale. This happens in two ways we've seen. One way is the project teams and the users of this technology. If we're developing an application for an operator, if they are not actively involved in the pilot process, if we don't have their involvement at least on a weekly basis to review the application, review the models, then this will not transition to production. We see that time and time again. We need buy-in, and we need it early, and we need it often. The other part of this is from a leadership standpoint. Almost everything we do as an enterprise artificial intelligence company is transformative. It means we're going from current processes to aspirational processes. In order to do that, you can't do that from a bottoms-up standpoint. You need a top-down push from leadership to say, this is what we are investing in. Because everyone is going to have their processes change, their job change, and you're going to hurt a lot of feelings, break a lot of hearts if you just jam this through bottoms up. And so that's why we always focus on making sure we have the right executive support from the top, and we always have the right buy-in from and involvement from the people who actually use this solution.
So on this last one here, this is what I was talking about with change management. And I'd offer that there's a third rail here in the department, and that's the acquisition contracting fields, right? Because they don't buy it this way. It's different, right? So think about, I'll just use an example of C3. You pay for it by the CPU hour. You use your people. It's all your data. How many CPU hours are we going to use? Well, what's the problem you're trying to solve? You see how you get in these circles that just get frustrating. So unless you have, to your point, the operators at the bottom are going to do this. And to be clear up, C3 AI is a product company, not a services company. They build a platform upon which you build your AIs. They don't build the AIs for you. You can use AIs that have been already built. They have 42 of them ready to go. But you can build your own. Anything you build your own belongs to you. Then you get the top level, which, often in my experience, people have, at my age group, and I would even offer, as I sit in those rooms with the J-Rocks and the A-Rocks and all the requirements meetings, a lot of people in those rooms don't understand this technology at all. And it's actually just discerning to me, because what happens unfortunately is they go through a great pitch and they leave and they go, I don't understand a word that they said. What are they talking about? So that, if that's the leadership, you got the user down here, you got the leadership question it, and then when you flip it over into the program world, it's a problem. And this is what I mean by the change management. But the way to get around it is what Thomas talked about, which is, what's its value? What's it going to do that's different today? That's either going to make things faster, better, cheaper. What is that? And if that can be defined, because I've been in the room several times when they lay out the problem, and our CEO, Tom Siebel, will say, that's not an AI problem. Or, you don't have good data to do that. That data is so biased, your solution, you don't need an AI for this. The data to solve that problem doesn't exist. This is a lot of problems around human resources, right? Because there's too much bias in the data. So that's the second. That's that part. So now I want to everybody goes through a journey. By the way, it's no different on the commercial side. The first problem starts with, we're going to do AI. Well, the first thing is, we got to find all our data. Okay, so when we go through that drill for a while, and then it's like, wow, this data is really messed up. Newsflash, everybody's data is messed up. Even better newsflash is, the data is always dirty. So we go through this idea of, we have to clean the data. Why are you doing that? If you clean the data, it doesn't represent the real world. There's actually technologies now that help you with this. The next part, though, after unify the data, is how do we make sense of it, right? And you've all watched these journeys. I mean, I see some of you smiling out here. We go through this journey, and then we're like, you know what? Now that we did this, we can build it ourselves. And then you'll build the technology stack, and then all those other problems will come to rest, and on the end, it's like, this isn't worth it. And another 2 years have gone by. So when I retired, I got in this business for one reason. I believe this is fundamental to future war, and we're a little bit behind compared to some of our adversaries. And so I'm all about how do I help the department scale, how do I educate leaders, how do I find use cases. I just want the department to start using this more within ethical boundaries, within the rules that are written, the way we think about it in terms of weapons and sensing. Yes, I was a division commander. I'm well aware of how all this is used. But I mean, it's time to really move on this, because just look at the advances in these technology. I just want to say this change management, though, this is a big part of it. We have to recognize as we go forward. It is not just going to say, I need some AI and it's going to magically appear. That's not going to happen.
So I'll leave with a summary of these four main reasons why we've seen AI projects fail. Are we solving the right problem, and can we measure our success? Are we doing it in a time frame that is fast enough, that drives the adoption? Are we keeping in mind what needs to happen for this to scale to the enterprise? And do we have the right support both from the grassroots as well as the leadership?
Yeah, and Thomas, I want to, on the speed to value, Thomas is being gracious here, 4 to 6 months. C3's done projects in like weeks. The key is to get the first one, especially for enterprise, small, that can deliver, and then you build off it. And on the C3 platform, all the models that are built can be reused for the next model. So just think about the way the Air Force, you want to talk just a little bit about the way the Air Force has done this? They started with one platform. The models that were built for that platform, oh wait, they can be used for this platform. You just port those models over. You don't have to reinvent them. You can see what happens. When you get to the next platform, you have twice as many models or reusable models. And before you know it, you see the speed of adoption across the 21 platforms in the Air Force just increase faster and faster and faster and faster, because they're reusing the models as they go forward. This is an example of, but they didn't start off with, we're going to put AI across 21 fleets in the Air Force. That isn't the way they started. We started with a very specific problem, actually a component of an airframe. That's how it started. And then it expanded out over time this way, because you could see value. And that speed to value and the whole thing's probably about a 2-year process, maybe 2-3 year process for 21 platforms. Yeah. Okay. Maybe now some questions. Let me close with a little bit on the platform. Yeah.
So I don't think I have to tell you that there's organizational problems with the speed to value pipeline. Right? And one of the things that I've seen over and over again is that leaders who are new to AI and new to ML development and these kinds of things are really reticent to put the resources against them that are necessary. Could you guys talk about some of the things that you've seen in that tension between resourcing and speed, and how we can ensure to sort of grease the pathway to make that a little bit easier? Because I don't know how many times I've been told, do XYZ by yourself in 4 months when, I need a team of 5 or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is actually one of the big sections in our CEO's book, Digital Transformation, is that when we stand up a center of excellence to bring technology to transform processes, we are bringing some of our people, but it requires people from the other organization. We will actually turn down pilots, we'll turn down revenue if there's not dedicated people on the other side who are supporting this project. Because we're not in the business of failing pilots. None of us are. No one wants to waste their time. And so it's part of the discipline that I think we as industry need to hold ourselves to, is not chasing after projects that don't have a future because they don't have the support necessary to learn that. But it's a critical point.
So changing the department's always hard. So the first way I start is it has to be a pressing problem, right? Where like everything else has almost been tried, and we just need something to solve this. Or the other way I say it's the burning platform problem, right? It's just so, because that then frees up some amount of resources to solve it, right? Then it gets to what Thomas talked about. Okay, it can't take a year. right? Because you don't have them. You only have a few months. So it's got to be small enough that they can see the value. And then at the same time, this is when I talk about the organizational change, if that value, I always have this phrase, and Ron Punisher, he knows, I always say plan for wild success, right? We often fail to do that. If this is wildly successful, what would have to change in terms of the resourcing, contracts, what is that? And you got to start working that early if you think you're going to be successful, right? Otherwise, it all becomes sequential. And what will happen is, in the department is, a year goes by, a year's too long in this space, right? It's got to be, if you can't bend it in this and show value, then find a better problem, bigger problem, et cetera. That would be my recommendation.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Could you help quantify the investment on the change management side of this? Say for a prototype that you said that was 4 to 6 months, the demonstration project. How might a buyer think about what to invest in the change management alone alongside the other portion of your solution?
Yeah, I can say I'll speak from a technology perspective. As a digital transformation company that implements enterprise artificial intelligence, most of that implementation is through software as a service applications. And we do that because that is the mechanism to bring in this technology that can iterate the fastest to be able to develop an application that supports both current processes, current workflows, as well as an injection of the technology as appropriate. And so we spend a lot of time doing just traditional agile software development to understand what does the user actually need to do, what clicks do they need to make in an application, and then what clicks would they need to make if we had some sort of predictive nature to what they're currently doing. And so part of what we focus on in change management is reducing that burden through agile software development. But there's a whole nother piece that General Cardone is more familiar with.
Well, I just want to build on that. So when people say, I'll use the example that with the Missile Defense Agency, right? So there were roughly 20 physicists building hypersonic missile tracks to present to the defense primes. Take them about 2 weeks, build 100 plus tracks. They came to an AI problem. It's actually a pretty tough AI problem because you're building a physical model. And I think that was like, I might have my numbers off, but you'll get the idea. 12 weeks, like 6 people. And people go, you're doing this with like most projects are done with 3 to 6 people from some C3. People are like, how are you doing that? It's because of the $1 billion that was spent developing the platform. The platform abstracts all the complexity. I wouldn't say all, significant amounts of the complexity and makes it manageable. Now, data scientists, data engineers, AI professionals are working on the AI problem, not all the problems to get the data in a place to actually be able to get it in a position to start working on this. Because when you look at a lot of AI projects, from my view, it's here. We don't cost this out very well, right? So this is why, and just recently, Tom changed the model. We used to be kind of a fixed rate. I mean, he changed it to CPU hour, much like Amazon and Azure, et cetera. You pay by the hour. And so that's how it works. I hope that helps. But the platform, we didn't spend much time on it, but what makes this powerful to me is imagine every type of anything that you need to work with the data to get in a position to be able to build AIs and to build AIs. Every type of service you can imagine is available for you. And it's through connections. You just determine what you want. Some companies, like Shell, they know exactly what they want their programmers to use. They dictate it. Others don't. And you can just plug and play. It all works without modification. It can all run on Azure, Amazon, Google, NVIDIA, your own cloud. Hybrid, doesn't matter, without modification. So you can take things in and out of this platform and you don't have to spend all this time rewiring it to make it work. And that's what gives it its power. And to me, this is why I got involved with the company, right? Because this sounds a lot like what the department normally wants, right? Which is, the Air Force does not always do it the same way as the Navy, it's the same way here. Missile defense has different, intelligence world has different, and so this would allow for a hybrid model to work, but all the models built on this platform would work for everybody. And once they're built, Tom doesn't care because this is a product for him. That all belongs to the government. Everything you build with that belongs to the government. Helpful? Okay. Well, first thanks. I have a few minutes after if anyone wants to come up and ask Thomas and I. I just want to say I appreciate you all taking interest. I go back to what I said. Thomas talked about purpose. I'm here in this company because I believe in its purpose, right? Which is enterprise AI, AI for defense, right? And I believe there's so much that can be done here that could really help out, not just the business side of the Department of Defense, but the warfighting side of defense, the intelligence side of the department, all of it. And so I think we're up here if you have any questions, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.